Good afternoon, everyone. We're finally this week going to pass 3 appropriation bills. I think that's clearly a step in the right direction, and we, of course, will engage in numerous discussions, and I expect you'll have some questions in relation to the supplemental and what form that'll take. All of that is going to be under discussion continuously until we get to an outcome.
Much of the evil that we've seen in the Middle East in the last couple of weeks, the murders, the kidnappings, the unspeakable acts against humanity have all been enabled by Iran. Our own State Department says that Iran has contributed $100 million per year to terrorist organizations in the last few years. And we know that over 90% of Hamas funding comes from Iran. And you add on top of that now the fact that in the last 2 weeks, Iranian proxies have attacked American service members in Iraq and Syria 25 different times. Iraq is at the core of all this violence and chaos and instability and hatred, frankly, that is plaguing that region of the world. And it is time for our administration to take a hard line in their dealings with Iran. And of course, that means no more lifting of sanctions. In fact, we have to put sanctions back on. No more unfreezing of billions of dollars to pay for prisoners. That I'm glad at least right now the administration has frozen that $6.6 billion again. But all of these are evidences and signs that the administration hasn't fully understood what Iran is all about and the threat that that regime represents, not only to that region, but to the entire world. And today we're having a vote on Jack Lew to be ambassador to Israel. And frankly, I don't think that either sends a message to Israel or anybody in the Middle East that we're serious about taking on and dealing with the threat that Iran poses, because obviously he was the architect of the Iranian nuclear deal. So I hope that the administration will get serious about Iran and the role that they play in all of this violence and bloodshed and destruction that we see across the Middle East, because until we do, until the rest of the world takes it as seriously, we're going to continue to see more of the same.
I've just returned from the southern border, and it's painfully clear that with Joe Biden's open border strategy, we're at increased risk of terrorism. Just 3 days before I got there, alert border agents seized a migrant with 4 explosive devices, the size of cannonballs. These are clearly tailor-made for terrorism. The night we were on midnight patrol, we encountered a couple of dozen of migrants from as far away as Moldova. One man, middle-aged, said he was traveling as a family. That's because families receive special treatment. He was holding tightly onto a 10-year-old girl. There was no mother. There was no sign of affection. And, you know, we used to do things like DNA testing to make sure that children weren't being exploited. Well, Joe Biden canceled all the DNA testing, so now you don't know who is coming into this country pretending to be families. 8 million illegal immigrants have come into this country during Joe Biden's presidency. Last month, another all-time high. It's gotten so bad the Department of Homeland Security has issued an increased risk of terrorism in this country. Of those 8 million, 2 million are gotaways, people that run and hide so they're not captured. Even if only 1 of 1,000 of them are terrorists, that's still 2,000 terrorists in our midst. Remember, 9/11, it only took a dozen terrorists to take down the World Trade Center and hit the Pentagon. The Border Patrol knows what we need to do. It's enforce the law. It's bring back the Remain in Mexico policy. It's this ending of catch and release and finish building the wall. Joe Biden won't allow any of it. Any additional border funding has to be used to stop the flow, not to make them come faster. Republicans in the Senate and the House are committed to fighting for our homeland security even if our president is not.
So it's been about 3.5 weeks now since I was in the Middle East and visited Israel immediately following the attacks by Hamas. And folks, you just need to make no mistake about it, that this chaos from Iranian-backed Hamas and the atrocities that they are committing, they are being fueled by Biden's appeasement strategy in the Middle East. Since President Biden took office, we have seen over $80 billion go into the pockets of the IRGC because President Biden has refused to enforce existing sanctions on Iran. And I am planning to put an end to this, this proxies payday. I have a bipartisan bill, again bipartisan, that cuts the red tape and it equips Homeland Security investigations and its proven record of enforcing sanctions with the resources it needs to go after and stop Tehran. So what we're planning to do, stop that money. We're going to enforce sanctions, stop the money going to Iran and the IRGC, take it out of their bloody little hands and give it to those that are victims of terrorism, and use it as well to pay down our national debt. So again, it's a bipartisan bill, and it's time we put an end to Biden's appeasement strategy and the refusal to enforce sanctions.
Good afternoon. This morning, we had a hearing in the Appropriations Committee with Secretary Blinken and Secretary Austin to talk about the supplemental and the needs. I believe they made a very good and compelling case why we need to continue supporting Ukraine with our weaponry and how important it is for us to push Putin back and to keep him from achieving any kind of victory and to help the Ukrainians achieve that victory. Also in Israel, the case was made both on the military side but on the humanitarian side that we see developing in Gaza, with some tough questions from many sides, both sides of the aisle, from our members as to where that money goes, who actually distributed it, and could it ever get into the hands of Hamas. But one part of the hearing was missing. We're going to have another hearing next week. But we did not get to, I don't think, one of the most important things about our national security, which is our southern border. It's already been mentioned today. Over 200 people from the terror watch list have been apprehended at the southern border just recently. We don't know where these people are from. It won't be disclosed where they're from. But all of this is tied in together because we can't sit here and help the rest of the world and not realize and not make sure that we're taking care of what's going on at home. I'm deeply disturbed by what I see as a rising anti-Semitism around the country. You see people on college campuses and elsewhere, and it's around the globe, but it really troubles me when I see it here at home. It's something I really never thought that I would see in my lifetime. So I look forward to having Senator Mayorkas and Senator Becerra in front of, or Secretary Mayorkas and Secretary Becerra in front of our Appropriations Committee next week as we consider how we're going to handle the supplemental, but also what parts of it are absolutely essential and what parts of it need to be shelved and moved to the back burner.
The odds that terrorists are coming across our southern border into the United States are increasing on an hour-by-hour basis. Last week, if you remember, I spoke about Cuba, Iran, North Korea, and Syria, the state sponsors of terror that our Border Patrol agents are encountering on our southern border. By the way, since October 1st, look at the month of October, hundreds of individuals from just those 4 countries have crossed the southern border in the United States. In September, it was more than 1,000. Let me highlight another, and that's Yemen, home of the Houthis. If you've been watching the news in the last couple of hours, the Houthis officially declared war on Israel. 74 citizens of Yemen were encountered on our southern border last year. Afghanistan, Lebanon, Somalia, Russia. More than 500 crossed here from those countries last month. People there, they hate us. So we should be prepared that they could attack us from within. Money's not going to stop it. This is primarily a policy battle. We need to tighten the asylum standards. We need to reform the parole program. And yes, we should finish building the wall. I want to make a short comment about anti-Semitism and what's happening in our country. Over the weekend, we saw protests over in London. We saw riots in Russia in an airport searching for Jews, asking for papers to find the Jews. But here at home, look at our campuses. Cooper Union, Jewish students were locked in a library, hiding in an attic, scared for their lives. Cornell, Jewish students were threatened and told just to hide. In Tulane, Jewish freshman was assaulted and a nose broken. Anti-Semitism equates the hatred of the Jews, and this must be forcefully condemned by U.S. leaders.
Leader McConnell. Good afternoon. What do you say to some of your Republican critics who oppose your advocacy for Ukraine? Senator Paul said that you were trying to undercut the new Speaker of the House. Senator Hawley called your position a, quote, mistake.
Well, let me just say that conceptually, Senator Schumer and I are in the same place in the sense that we view all of these problems as connected. Ukraine is part of it. Obviously, Israel enjoys overwhelming support, but we think it's also important that we have a part related to Asia, and that's Taiwan. And then, as several of my members have underscored, we think it's important to do something credible about our own border, which is basically wide open. So conceptually, I think Schumer and I are in the same place. In terms of the details, what is really needed to protect the border? Not a bunch of money going to Chicago and New York, but something seriously drafted. And we were working on that, and I think the Democrats will have to accept a really serious U.S.-Mexico border protection bill in order to get our people on board for a comprehensive approach.
But it seems like there's disconnect between you and some of your Republican members, specifically on the Ukraine issue, not so much on the border.
Well, I don't have to explain to you, the form that the bill takes will be determined by the majority leader. And we'll see after that whether there are amendments offered and how they turn out. I'm just speaking for myself. I think we need to address all four of those areas in a credible way.
Leader McConnell. What is your reaction to the House Speaker's Israel-only bill?
Well, that's an opinion many people have. It's not surprising, but in order to make a law, it has to pass both bodies and be signed by the president. And we'll see if the bill comes out of the House, and if so, what kind of margin it has. My own view, I just expressed, is that we need to treat all four of these areas, all four of them: Ukraine, Israel, Taiwan, and the border.
Leader McConnell. Do you have any reaction to Senator Durbin's announcement that the Judiciary Committee is going to subpoena Harlan Crow, Robin Arkley, Leonard Leo as part of its Supreme Court ethics investigation?
Yeah, well, what he's targeting here is private citizens with no legislative purpose. I think it's completely and totally inappropriate.
Leader McConnell.
The Commandant of the Marine Corps hospitalized, and it's renewed questions about Tommy Tuberville's holds on military promotions. Do you think that it's time for him to lift those holds so that those promotions can go through?
I'm sure you remember that I said this was a bad idea quite a while ago. I still think it's a bad idea, and particularly applied to people who don't make policy. And so I have been among those trying to convince Senator Tuberville to express his opposition some other way by people who actually make policy, as opposed to our military heroes who are sworn to stay out of politics.
Leader McConnell.